Hey guys, it's Mike here, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about something that's very controversial right now in the Dragon Ball community, and that is Master Roshi's performance against Jiren in the manga version of the Tournament of Power. So for some additional context, let's take a little trip back in time to when I did a video about Master Roshi discussing how I thought that his power scaling and overall writing of his character in the anime version of the Tournament of Power was ridiculous. Naturally, this led to some backlash, which any criticism of Super and its power scaling tends to do. Many members of the community were up in arms, arguing vehemently that this was not the case. But anyway, the most common excuses I heard from my detractors were: number 1, Frost and the people that Roshi fought were heavily suppressed. Number 2, Roshi's skill advantage allowed him to dodge attacks, despite an overwhelming power advantage. And number 3, Roshi's Mafuba could seal away any enemy with minimal drain, regardless of power, and he could even use it several times in a row because he trained off screen. Even though the last time that he personally used it on screen, it killed him when he tried to seal away someone who wasn't even 10 times stronger than himself. Yeah, I guess that wouldn't stop him from sealing away people hundreds, thousands, or even millions of times stronger than himself, such as Frost and Vegeta, right? Or at least they're supposed to be, according to many of the most popular power scales right now. Couldn't be that the old guy was written to be way too strong out of nowhere. Now that's just super unlikely. But in truth, I was merely one member of a growing section of the audience who began to question things when we watched the episodes building up to the Tournament of Power. One of these episodes included Roshi sparring with Goku, and doing so much better than he realistically should have. This then carried over into the tournament itself. As a result, I and many others concluded something that only common sense would really allow for, which is that the writers broke the power scale and simply stopped caring about consistency because they wanted to have quote-unquote cool fights. Master Roshi was a character who was rendered obsolete all the way back in the original Dragon Ball, and was never once shown to train in Z. Yet there he stood in the middle of the ring as a shining example of the problems with the power scale in Dragon Ball Super. But again, many people, mostly the hardcore Super defenders, tried to deny this. They said that I and others who were watching this happen clear as day were wrong, and that we simply didn't understand Dragon Ball. That comment in particular is really funny to me, considering the fact that I've been watching this franchise and reading the manga longer than many of these people who tell me I don't understand it have even been alive. I was power scaling Dragon Ball when these people were in preschool learning to count on their fingers. But just watching the original Dragon Ball and then Dragon Ball Z, it's pretty clear that the power scaling is far worse now than it ever was in either of those shows or the manga. Honestly, for as bad as the scaling in Dragon Ball GT can be at some points, the Dragon Ball Super anime still manages to put it to shame with stuff like this. But I digress, because that leads into what I'm going to be discussing today, which is the counterpart to the Dragon Ball Super anime, the Dragon Ball Super manga. Now, for the longest time, people have tried to tell me that the Super manga is so much better than the anime, that Toyotaro is the next great successor to Toriyama, and that his writing is a work of genius. At least the parts that he doesn't trace, although many people still try to find excuses for that too. But the one thing I've heard so many times in the past is that the Dragon Ball Super manga has far better power scaling than the anime. Yet, as a manga reader myself who has been following it since day one, I can tell you that this is not the case. So for all the people who told me that the manga version of the Tournament of Power would be better, all I could do was sit back and watch this unfold until we finally have what we have here today, where Toyotaro has actually drawn Master Roshi fighting against Jiren one-on-one. And if you thought that Roshi versus Frost was bad, then you haven't seen anything yet, as we see that Roshi is not only dodging attacks from Jiren, but even attacking him back, and at one point Jiren is even hitting or at least grazing Roshi without instantly KOing him. Now, this was bad enough in the anime when a character like Frost, who is stronger than Goku's post-god base form, was pushed back and then nearly sealed away by Roshi. It was bad enough that Roshi not only didn't immediately drop dead then and there, but actually proceeded to use the move again and accidentally help seal away Vegeta. But this is Jiren, the main antagonist of the Tournament of Power, someone who has been flat out stated in the anime and manga to be stronger than a god of destruction. This is the same Jiren who in the same tournament beat Elite hit, a Super Saiyan Blue level fighter, and eliminated him. But now Master Roshi of all characters, and someone who was weaker than Tien back in Dragon Ball, is able to fight one-on-one with the main antagonist 2 series later? He even surprises Jiren as well as the main cast. And even worse, it's said that Roshi's movements are similar to Ultra Instinct, and he pretty much inspires Goku through this fight to learn Ultra Instinct himself. Like, is this a real thing, or is it some kind of elaborate practical joke? This whole thing makes absolutely no sense. It might even be worse than Goku using the Hakai without seeing it, or Vegeta destroying multiple merged Zamasus with one attack. People do all these calculations trying to see just how powerful Jiren is. They say that he can destroy the multiverse, that he's billions of times stronger than Frieza on Namek, or even more. Yet here we have Master Roshi, someone who shouldn't even be half as strong as Namek Frieza, dodging Jiren's attacks and surprising him. And the manga chapter does try to give some kind of explanation here, as shortly before this Roshi was able to defeat Casserole, a member of Jiren's team, because he had the edge in skill, despite Casserole, someone who uses a scouter of sorts in this version, saying that Roshi's power should be dirt by comparison. Hey, do you guys remember when martial arts master Goku dominated Frieza on Namek in his base form because of his decades of experience honing his craft? Oh right, that didn't happen. Because Frieza, a character who spent most of his time sitting in a floating chair like 1990s Professor X, and has been stated multiple times to have never trained, dominated base Goku the entire fight. The only way that Goku was able to overcome Frieza was because he got a 50 times power up through the Super Saiyan form. As the fight on Namek showed, martial arts skill was pointless in the face of overwhelming power. That was a clear theme throughout Dragon Ball Z. Yet decades later in the Tournament of Power, we're supposed to buy that it now matters? Even the anime version tried to dump this idea on us when base Goku fought Super Saiyan Caulifla. And if you think this is a valid in-universe answer, then you really need to go back and rewatch Dragon Ball Z, preferably in the Japanese, without the constant dub changes. Especially this one. But then we get to the most popular excuse to give as an answer whenever nonsense like this happens in Super, and that's the good old, they're heavily suppressed. That's right guys, if you want to solve every single power scaling problem in the Dragon Ball franchise, just make sure to say those 2 words, heavily suppressed, and they're suddenly okay and not bad writing in the least. You'll even get bonus points if you throw in caught off guard, because that totally makes everything better and excuses writing worse than any middle schooler can come up with. We might as well have Jiren fight Emperor Pilaf next. As long as we say that he's holding back, it doesn't make the fight stupid at all. So naturally Jiren, who pretty much stomped hit and has been fighting Goku, just decided to hold back to 1/100 quintillionth of his power so he could fight some old man that he has no attachment to. Sure, he may be Goku's master, or at least he was decades ago, but it's still wasting precious time in a tournament with a 48-minute time limit. I guess he was also just pretending to be surprised during the fight. Beerus and the others who were watching must have been too. Or maybe this whole scene just makes no sense. I think that sounds a little bit more reasonable, don't you? Now let's be real here. If Master Roshi is many times weaker and slower than his opponent, then he should be getting wrecked with 0 difficulty. That's just how things in Dragon Ball work. No amount of skill or experience can make up for a disparity of speed and power that great. It would be like Bruce Lee fighting the Flash. Sure, Bruce Lee was a martial arts master, but he's so slow by comparison that he might as well be standing still. He could never hit the Flash or dodge his attacks in a real straight-up fight. And just the same, Roshi could never dodge or surprise Jiren. Roshi would still need a high level of power on top of that skill to do what he was shown doing. But for devil's advocate purposes, let's use the argument that he doesn't have a huge power level here, and say that Jiren has suppressed himself to be like King Piccolo or Raditz levels. Even then, Jiren's senses would still be able to follow Roshi regardless of how fast or erratic his movements are. After all, it's not like a character needs to power up to sense someone better. Well, unless they're blinded like Gohan. But Toyotaro cut that whole part out of the manga. He's such a great writer, guys. Did you notice how he said that Goku never listened to Roshi? He totally understands the characters he's writing. Totally. So really, Master Roshi's writing and scaling is probably even worse in the manga than the anime, and no doubt worse than you ever imagined it could be. Although given the manga's track record, I can't really say that I didn't see it coming. I guess a part of me hoped it was just the anime staff bungling it up. Most of the arc had bad scaling and power consistency. But now I'm starting to wonder if Toriyama told both Toei and Toyotaro to make Roshi super strong and have plot hacks martial arts abilities out of nowhere. After all, it is in both versions, whether people want to accept it for the anime or not. Or maybe he just wrote a note saying, have none of the power scaling make sense. I want to see how people try to rationalize this mess. That would make more sense. I'm sure he's laughing all the way to the bank right now. He's gonna need his own Scrooge McDuck vault after the Broly movie comes out. Now, as much as I'd like to see a return to better power scaling, I doubt it will happen at this point. That's why I've largely stopped trying to make sense of it all, because Toriyama, Toyotaro, Toei, and those behind this franchise simply don't care enough to have it make sense. All they really care about is their own bottom line. The power scaling in Z may have been bad at times, I mean look at the Buu saga, but at least Toriyama introduced better defined concepts and better explanations to help us suspend our disbelief. At least back then Toriyama was driven by some sort of artistic motivations. Now he can hardly be bothered to write more than a few notes, and when he does, he leaves them in the hands of people who neither have the talent nor inclination to fix any problems that arise. But as I'm so often reminded, Dragon Ball Super is quote-unquote a kid show. It's a cartoon and a comic book meant for children, so that makes it immune to criticism, right? Well, no, actually it doesn't. The intended audience doesn't mean the property has to make any less sense. In fact, there are other franchises with the same target demographics that make far more sense than this. Go watch Hunter x Hunter or My Hero Academia, for example. Or you can just go watch Dragon Ball or Z. All of them have done this better. But even then, the truth remains that in-universe explanations simply can't fix out-of-universe problems. No amount of exposition makes Master Roshi fighting Jiren any less ridiculous, because it was a bad creative decision. No amount of counter-arguments or debates or ad hominem or phony clickbait debunk videos can change this, because it doesn't work narratively. That is why Master Roshi's writing and power scaling is even worse than you thought. So what do you guys think? I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of emotionally charged comments down below, but let's try to keep it civil. After all, we're all fans of and love the Dragon Ball franchise and have remained fans during the good times and the bad. I just want to see a return to the good. And if you're new to this channel, then make sure to subscribe and enable notifications so that you can see all of my videos right away when they come out. And if you like this video, then make sure to stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future.
Yeah, and you better subscribe, enable those damn notifications.